Hi, my name is Gilles. I'm with the Institute of Cultural Affairs as a volunteer and live in Mexico, but I was working with the Institute for many, many decades, including when this triangle that you see behind me and on this web page was created. I simply want to do a kind of an introduction to you to take kind of its sterility away and it's just to be able to see that it is an instrument that is very helpful and to begin to understand what's happening in society today or what happened in the past. So I'm going to share with you a little bit of my early period of my life in relationship to what is called the social process, because it's applicable at almost any level as well as any time. So let me just start that I was raised and grew up and raised in a small town in Pennsylvania called Meadville, Pennsylvania. It was about just under 20,000 people. I went to school there my whole life, including college, and left there. And during that period of time, I found myself at home. By that I mean I felt myself connected to the town. I felt myself cared for by the town, although my section of the town, and it was what shaped me to a high degree. And I simply want to share with you some of the things that went on that I became very familiar with, but also what changed in that town that we would call simply an imbalance began to happen. So let me just start. I was raised by my parents who were, my father worked at Talon, which was a zipper company in Meadville, Pennsylvania, and my mother did not work out. She was home, although she was trained as a nurse, and so she had that kind of care capacity with her, but it was in those times when only one person had to work out in order to make it. So my dad worked, let's take a look at the economic life of the town. It was, Talon was the largest employer in town. It employed over 5,000 people. In a town of 18,000 is essentially almost all the families had somebody working at Talon. Talon Zipper at the time was almost a monopoly. That is, any zipper on anything was probably a Talon zipper. Today they're all made out pretty much out of China or Japan, and that's part of the story. But in any case, he worked there. And so that was that. It also, what's very interesting is that Meadville had a nickname. It was called Tool City. And that's because of all the engineering firms, small engineering firms, that developed to support as a resource the demand, the engineering demand that the making of zippers required. So the production was surrounded by small, exquisite tool companies and tool and die companies. So that was the kind of the economic heartbeat. Now there were other places in town and commercials and so on, but relative to where people worked, Talon was the heartbeat of the town. Over here where decisions are made, or politics, the order and justice and welfare, simply just let me say that things worked. There was a courthouse, there was a police force, there was a fire department, decisions got made, the council was all local people, and so on. And so if things needed to get done in the town or the courthouse or what have you, I'll simply say that back here in order, those of us who were the kids, we had to look out for Rosie the motorcycle. There was one motorcycle policeman, and he was sort of the kind of person we kind of checked on and watched for. Anyhow, but let me just say something about the meaning giving of the political and the corporate welfare. The ability for that community to find ways to care for people, the well-being of it, was something that I learned later. That there were structures in town that did that, but in the government. But it had to do with making sure everybody was cared for, and that was done. Let me say something about the culture of the town. Now, we were a college town. In fact, that's where I went to college, Allegheny College. And so the culture of the town had a great kind of an intellectual flavor to it, though it was very common people. But people were very proud that there was a college in town. And that I'm not so much sure it was wisdom, but there certainly was a really knowledge resource that was available to so many people, and they did events and speaking engagements, and you could take courses there and so on from the town. But the wisdom that I finally experienced was primarily from some of the people that helped raise me. My mother was a wise woman in her life experience, and I won't go on to that. Style. Well, the style of that was like almost any small town. It revolved around school districts. Mine was First District School area. There was a Second District, Third District. There's 5 districts, which is really the way in which the representation for decision making was done. And but the style was each neighborhood, you knew where, which was more the Italian area section or the more black section of town, and so on. I mean, it was certainly divided ethnically. People tended to that relative to churches. Most of the professors in that and their families went to the Unitarian Church. I was Methodist. There was a Presbyterian church, Baptist church. There was 3 different Catholic churches, and a synagogue, and so on. So the symbols and cultural commonality. But what I'm saying is, you had a sense of pride and a sense of what your identity was. I was from Meadville. As I grew up, things began to change, but slowly. But the great jolt happened when the economic heartbeat of the town, Talon, was bought out. The owner originally lived there. Gideon Sunback was the inventor of the zipper, and his family was there, so he cared about the town. And he would never move the production. There was 3 production plants and so on. So it was bought out by a conglomerate called Textron. And for a while they just kept it there, but eventually they wanted to save money and they moved much of the production to the south. And to make the story shorter, the economic center of the town collapsed. And it was the first time I began to wonder, who made that decision? Who had the power to just rip the heart out of the town? Who had the power to say, we're going to take all these jobs and move them to South Carolina or eventually to Latin America, and eventually Textron disappeared and most of those jobs went to Japan. And I kept saying, who has the right to do that? In other words, the decision part, we had no say in the decision as a town. And the whole thing collapsed. And therefore, the culture also collapsed. The second big shock was Walmart came. But Walmart didn't come to Meadville. It came to an intersection about 5 miles away where they could start a plaza. And sure enough, people began to shop at Walmart. Well, that might be great to be able to one-stop shopping, but the downtown died. All of the commercial centers, the Sears, the Montgomery Wards, this place, that place, all of a sudden when I would come back to visit, there'd be nothing down there. Even the banks closed. There used to be several banks. And all of a sudden I just felt the heartbeat of what it was, a vital downtown, 3 movie theaters when I was a kid and so on, just disappeared. And so this whole culture of Meadville not only lost its economic heartbeat, but it lost its cultural center, which at this point was the market house, where the farmers would bring in their local market, and everybody would go on Saturday morning, primarily to talk to one another, and just interchange and sit at the coffee place and so on. I mean, it just disappeared. And so what I'm saying is that the social process is a way to begin to understand and ask questions. Why things are the way they are, and then when they change, where would you go to make corrections? Who controls the decisions? And so that's part of my life story and just begin to see the impact of living living the social process. Thank you.